We should. Isn't that a local thing? The zombie nativity.
I am not talking about the zombie nativity. It is the best thing in America, and it's underappreciated.
I want to go visit it. It's going to be my pilgrimage. It's going to be my Hajj.
For Thursday, December 17th, 2015, this is All Downhill. This episode, the Grammys and record sales.
I'm Patrick Simmons.
And I'm Michael.
And this is All Downhill, and you wanted to talk about the Grammys because I guess you still watch television?
No, I actually don't own a TV. This whole week, I've been, driving in my car as one does to work. I listen to the radio, and I've got a CD player in my car, and I don't have an aux cable, and I don't have a tape deck, so I can't listen to my MP3 player. So I go to work, and the last couple days, all I hear is Grammys, 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 Grammys. I can't even escape it on NPR. Oh my god, Grammys, 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 because apparently Kendrick Lamar has won, got 9 nominations or something, which is a big deal, I guess.
Kendrick Lamar's strange, I think, is a very small digression, because he seems to be very popular among these sort of artsy, hipstery people, and meanwhile he's also very popular among the party, get drunk, have a good time, nail sleuts, frat people, yeah.
Dude, I just want to bang sleuths.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, Kendrick Lamar, I think, is successful because he encompasses the whole spectrum of douchebag emotion, human emotion.
Yeah, no, I think I can agree with you. And you know what? I tried listening, because I'm like, I don't know who Kendrick Lamar is. I tried listening to it, and I just doesn't do it. His lyrics are decent, but he doesn't really have very good flow, and his beats, they just don't strike me as very good.
I put less thought into it than that. For me, it's just been people like, oh, do you like this song? It's Kendrick Lamar. And I'm like, could you play like the Rolling Stones?
Anyway, so I kind of was stumbling around and I'm thinking, man, they're making such a big deal about the Grammys. I want to, go and see what the buzz is about. Because, I always kind of disregarded them as being totally irrelevant. And so I just went online. I couldn't find anything like past like the year 2011 written about the Grammys.
Okay.
That's how relevant they are, because the article that we're referencing is from thebuffalonews.com, written in 2011. That's how relevant this shit is.
Let's be fair about one thing, though. You can't say the Grammys are irrelevant. The Grammys are an important, a deeply important even, part of credibility for hipsters. As soon as you win one, no one buys your albums anymore.
Oh yeah, no, I guess
Arcade Fire.
We're looking at you, and then Win Butler just decides to play basketball or something. That's what he did after that, didn't he? Because no hipsters were buying his album.
I don't really know what happened to Arcade Fire.
I didn't like Reflector, just throwing that out there.
I don't know what that is. Is that an album?
That's an album after they won a Grammy for
The Suburbs?
The Suburbs, yeah.
You know what's funny? I liked Arcade Fire. I don't think I've listened to anything after The Suburbs, though. I don't.
Suburbs was their only good album. I didn't like Neon Bible, and I don't like Reflector.
I think to make me excited about your album, you have to have a very long hiatus, because then I go, ooh, so-and-so's coming back, and I get really excited.
Like the Chemical Brothers?
The Chemical Brothers' new album is Album of the Year.
Is it?
I know earlier we were talking about what our picks for Album of the Year might be, and I was like running a whole bunch of things through. It could be this, it could be this. But now that if I'm going to put my foot down, it's probably the Chemical Brothers, yeah.
See, that one's on the very top of my list as well, because it's just so good. You couldn't have had a better return album than that, I think.
It's everything about it is solid, and getting Q-Tip back, it gave you that feel of like the old Galvanized thing coming back. It's catchy, it's quirky, it's clever, and it's very Chemical Brothers, and it might win a Grammy to bring us back around.
It could, because they are actually nominated for Best Electronic Album of the Year. So there's that. But
when are the Grammys?
The Grammys are February 2nd, I believe. Okay. They're at the beginning of February, if not that. So basically, I was trying to find articles just talking about, okay, well, what's the point of the Grammys? So basically, really, and I didn't know this before, but basically, the Grammys are just industry, people who are already in the industry, who control the industry, just jerking themselves off, essentially.
Well, hang on, isn't that what the Oscars are, though?
That's kind of what the Oscars are, except
I
think they generally have
the
a little
Motion
bit.
Picture Academy, so a group of people involved with making movies then go, these are the ones that are best. So, I just assumed Grammys was the same thing. It's
but you still
record industry people going,
but I think you still have, I think you have a few more movies with artistic integrity than, say, oh, Nicki Minaj is up for Rap Album of the Year, when it clearly should be not Nicki Minaj.
Titanic won a bunch of Oscars, and that's all I have to say about artistic integrity.
Yeah.
Okay, Nicki
Sure.
Minaj can win whatever she wants. She has more artistic integrity in one of her ridiculously enormous badonkadonk cheeks than Titanic had in its entire 45 hours of absurdly never-ending footage.
I can agree with that.
So yeah, so that's before don't sit here and tell me the Oscars have artistic integrity and the Grammys don't because we have modern pop artists, and the Oscars also don't have artistic integrity.
Yeah, no, pretty much. But no, so basically, I think it was really more so bringing up a point because I couldn't find hardly any article that was like, oh, here's why the Grammys are good. Or here's why the Grammys are relevant. I couldn't find anything. I scoured Google.
Okay.
I found one or two that might have possibly been passable. But basically, I think it brings up a bigger point in how music is consumed now versus when music was consumed and sold back in the day. Because back in the day, you had DJs who were like, I hear this song on a record. The record company sends me these, like 20 EPs or whatever with one B-side on, and they say, listen to these, play it. And then the DJ comes out and he's like, I really like this one. I'm going to play the shit out of this. And then you had him play it for a few weeks. People loved it. They bought the record, and then you moved on to the next thing.
Sure.
And that's how people discovered music, because there was no internet back then, obviously. Al Gore didn't invent the internet yet.
To be fair, even as, back in, and I can't say exactly how far back this goes, but I know at least in the 70s this was still going on. Stations would usually have a, for the DJs, you play what you want, but here's a list of songs that these ones or ones from these must be played X number of times an hour or X number of times a day. They still didn't have that.
Yeah,
but,
you still,
but,
you
but
did
I get
have
what
that.
you mean. DJs had a lot more freedom.
Yeah, you did have that a lot more, and I think that we just don't have that anymore. And because it was people who are in the music industry, it's done by the record labels. The Grammys is kind of a way of saying, oh, look at how great the music industry is, if you're signed to Atlantic Records or Capitol or whatever else, I think. And so you have all these people, you've got, there are a few actually surprising ones this year. Like you said, the Chemical Brothers are up for Electronic Album of the Year. The Weeknd is actually up for a few major ones, like I think Song of the Year and Album of the Year, which is weird because The Weeknd is kind of one of those sort of fringe electronic sort of
They're fringier.
artists.
They're fringier.
Yeah, they're fringier. Yeah. They're more mainstream. He does a lot of remixes and stuff, and produces things more so. So he is mainstream, but he's nowhere near as mainstream as a lot of the other people that have been getting this sort of thing. So I don't know. I think that just the way we consume music now, I get everything from, you were talking earlier, like our Facebook page that we have, the War on Terrible Music, where we go and post new shit that we find or stuff that we really like or stuff that we used to like and found again, and we post it. So we have a group of friends who kind of just go on and do that. We find stuff there. I find a lot of stuff on Bandcamp because that's one of my favorite places to go. Recently it's been a little bit kind of flooded with kind of shitty electronic stuff, but it goes in ebbs and flows. But I don't listen to music on the radio except for WNKU, our local college station, because they actually play local music and things that I can find. And I think that's something that we really don't find, because if you go and listen to like the big stations like EBN, even 96.5, the alternative station, you hear the same songs that you were hearing in the early 2000s. They're still playing the same songs.
Yeah,
that's... Have you noticed that? I haven't heard, obviously you're going to play, Master of Puppets and Enter Sandman like 50 times because you're the rock station.
You see, I gotta be fair, I don't listen to, I guess, I don't want to say the mainstream stations because I don't want to sound like a hipster, but I basically, if I'm listening to the radio, regular over-the-airwaves radio, as opposed to like internet radio, I'm listening to WNKU, which, there'll be a link in the show notes, by the way, because they do stream online if anybody wants to check them out. They're good. And they used to play a whole lot of bluegrass, but they're very indie, and they've kind of had a format change recently. They do the thing where they play at least one local artist every hour,
which I really love.
Which I love. But they have a lot of overlay with, my dad listens to a lot of satellite radio, and he mentions that they play a lot of the same stuff that Alt Nation on Sirius plays. So they're more into the more alternative thing. You hear a lot of Silver Sun pickups, you hear a lot of Alt J. So it's, the more mainstream friendly, I guess, alternative you would call it maybe. But it's still, so that's more what I hear on the radio. And because of that, I don't hear as much old stuff. I still hear it. Yesterday I got in the car and heard Behind Blue Eyes and wondered honestly what station I was on, because I thought, this is The Who. Am I on the right? Which I was happy about it, but it was still like, is this the right station? And then they played Silver Sun pickups, and I went, oh, it is.
Yeah, you still do get that overlap.
But so I get more modern stuff on the radio because I think the stations that either are more indie or have the flexibility to be more indie tend to play newer things, because both they're trying to stay hip and cool and with it, but also a lot of those indie bands are constantly putting out new stuff, and they want to they want to get it played because they're always in the whole, we're here for the artists, unlike like the big guys. And I think the bigger stations, I think, are just going for, and I don't mean to knock them, but there are these sort of standards that it's like you just kind of expect to hear.
Yeah, I mean, like WEBN's gonna play all of the shit that you play at, I guess, like a sporting event or like if you're tailgating or something.
Sure.
Like, everyone knows these songs.
They have mandatory Metallica, right?
They have mandatory Metallica.
As far as I know, every city on Earth has, or at least in the United States, has at least one radio station that has mandatory Metallica, which at some point is like an hour-long block or so of nothing but Metallica. I've never met someone who doesn't go, oh yeah, in my city, Station X does that.
Yeah, no, I've never heard of anybody not. I think EBN does it like at least 3 times a day.
I'm beginning to. There are times where I'll tune in and I'll go, is your entire station mandatory Metallica?
See, I feel like EBN would be better if they did that, and that's coming from a person who's not a huge Metallica fan.
I know, but again, rock stations are weird too, though, because rock, and this isn't entirely true. This is somewhat unfair. There's still a lot of rock coming out. A good example, Five Finger Death Punch released a new album this year, but there you don't see, at least in like the, I guess, mainstreamy, constantly pops up on the front of YouTube, and they're showing up on the cover of Entertainment Weekly and stuff. The very in-your-face mainstreamy. You don't tend to see rock the way you see people like Nicki Minaj, Kendrick Lamar, Coldplay.
Yeah.
Adele, obviously a lot right now, but you see these kind of celebrity, Taylor Swift, it's usually the good-looking celebrity figurehead people, and the only person in rock who, and I mean no offense to rock musicians as a whole, but the only person who really even qualifies as good-looking celebrity figurehead, probably in rock and roll at all right now, is probably Dave Grohl.
Yeah.
He's as close as you get to like mainstreamy kind of good-looking dude.
I think Dave Grohl is probably the mainstream spokesman for rock and roll.
Yeah, so
you could make the case that
rock, you're getting a lot of the stuff from back when that was more in. When you remember the point, like there was a point where that was the in thing, is people like Kurt Cobain and Eddie Vedder were hot, and now it's people like Chris Martin are hot. So the stations,
Levine,
yeah. So
Maroon
people
5,
who focus on stations that play music by people like them are playing all the new stuff, and stations that play the sort of the rock or grungier kind of thing are playing stuff from back when that was the cool thing.
They're still playing STP when Scott Weiland was
they're
the lead
playing
singer.
Yeah, exactly. Rip, man. But I mean, that's what they're playing. They're playing back from when, like, from when, today if you listen to Nirvana, it's, oh, that's cool, it was a 90s thing. In the 90s, that was mainstream-ish in a sense,
It was.
So that's what they're playing. They're playing back from when they were mainstream.
Yeah. I don't know. I think my big problem is that, like, if I go in the car and I don't want to listen to talk radio, or I don't want to listen to, like, WNKU's, like, having, because every once in a while they have, like, a slump of songs that I just don't like, and I just change the station.
I feel like every station's going to do that.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing.
Actually, I can't think of a single thing that doesn't, because that's, I think, the funniest thing is when people go, man, this station's playing a lot of songs I don't like right now. My grandma listened to nothing but the classical music station, and she would complain because they'd play classical composers. She'd go like, oh, I hate Vivaldi, and like, shut off the radio, So it's, I feel like no matter what genre you're listening to, there's going to be at least one or two people in it you don't like, and you're going to have that point happen.
Yeah. I mean, but I feel like there should be more, I think, diversity when it comes to new music, because there's a lot of good new rock out there. Like, in WBN, I feel like they're playing all these standards, and they might play one or two new songs. I think they do play the new Five Finger Death Punch every once in a while, and I don't listen to EBN very often. I've got it on my presets because I'm like, oh, what's EBN playing? Because sometimes, sometimes I'll play something I like, and inevitably I go there, and if it's not Metallica, it's some random STP clone.
I think part of you gotta keep in mind, it's also what they're sent to play. They have their lists, but those lists are partially formed by station managers who are getting sent this, that, and the other from the record company and told this is what we're trying to sell. And I think that might also be part of the problem, is when you have a genre that sells, I think, a little differently, I guess, than, like Nicki Minaj. I
think it boils down to corporate then, because you have corporate people who are pushing these things, and you have the DJs who really don't have as much freedom as they used to. I mean, you still had those, you have to play this many songs, but they don't have as much freedom as they used to. And you have the corporate funding. Like EBN and 96 Rock and all those stations that are local are funded by, they're like Clear Channel stations. They're funded by, they make their money with commercials and money from record companies.
Yeah.
So they are going to play the same things. It's just disappointing they don't play newer things from that station, just not the big stuff. Whereas you have WNKU, or any other indie college station, which is funded by the college and not generally and
or
fund drives,
listener donations.
Or listener donations.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's where you really get that difference. But I mean, that whole system is kind of like, that whole system, you can transplant that onto the Grammys, because it's just essentially the record companies wanking and saying, look at how great my music is. And we're going to give it this many awards.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. And I think it's trying to sell things, but I think that people are just not paying attention. There's actually a funny, and it's weird because there were so many news articles about it, and that's what struck me as wanting to talk about this, because like, how can this be relevant? And there's so many news articles and news stories about this on the radio. And I think just one of the big things about it is that it's the funding aspect. They're just trying to get it out there, and people are talking about. One of the interesting articles that I found when I was trying to research this and see, are there any articles that are positive? Are the Grammys a good thing? Are they relevant? One of them, the only one that I could really find that was pretty positive, was one where it was like, yeah, basically it's the NFL of music. There can't be, I think the whole gist of it was, you can't say that there's any one athlete that was the greatest athlete ever, because there's so many different sports. Triathletes and stuff like that, and some people who compete in the Olympics are closer, but you really have people who specialize in something. There's really not one person who's just good at everything they've ever done.
Yeah.
Even Michael Jordan, all he wanted to do was play baseball, and he was the greatest basketball player of all time, but he was not very good at baseball.
Yeah, okay,
you got stuff like that. So they were saying, look, it's like, a lot of people like soccer, but the Grammys is like the NFL or the Super Bowl, where it's this big spectacle, and if you don't really care about it or you don't take it seriously, it's more fun that way, because it really doesn't mean anything. And I thought that was kind of like striking, that was the most positive thing that I could find about the Grammys, is that, if you don't pay attention, it's just silly. And I think that's where we're at necessarily with music, because like I said, I don't know. I know, there are some people out there that I know and that I work with who are older than me. They get all their music from the radio.
Sure.
And, that's just, that's the way they were. They didn't have the internet when they were growing up, or if they did, it was dial-up, and, we came from the dial-up era.
God, yeah.
But, so they're a little bit older than me, so they probably didn't really have much internet at all. So they really didn't have that mentality of, I'm going to go out and find new music on the internet. And it's just one of those things where, I think the Grammys is just kind of, I don't know, it's just wanking, man. That's all it is. I mean, it could be interesting, but I'm just not interested in seeing any of it because there's no one I care about. Yeah, do I care if if some band that I really care about, like say the Chemical Brothers, wins Electronic Album of the Year, I'm going to be happy for them, but does it really matter?
It doesn't affect whether or not you've listened to the album.
Probably not, no. I've already listened to that album. It's not going to say, oh, Kendrick Lamar won 9 albums. I want to find out what he's all about. It doesn't make me want to do that at all.
That's okay. Well, yeah, I've got a question for you about that, but we'll go to break real quick, and then we'll come back and I'll ask you.
Yeah, sure.
Hey guys, this is Patrick Simmons, co-host of All Downhill, reminding you that you could be advertising right here, right now. If you're interested in having us shill your product, business, website, podcast, band, whatever, get in touch with me personally via email, patrick@alternative-internet.com. On the other hand, if you're not interested in advertising, maybe you're just an average listener, and you would just like a way to help promote All Downhill, make sure you visit us on iTunes and give us a rating. We would really appreciate it. You can also hit us up on Facebook, facebook.com/alldownhillshow, or Twitter @alldownhillshow, and let us know what you think of the show, what you think we can improve, and so forth. Also, be sure to visit our website, alternative-internet.com/alldownhill, and click the free stickers link, because right now, no shipping, no nothing, no strings attached. We are sending fans free vinyl All Downhill stickers. They are super cool looking. We got pictures on the site, and you could shove them on your car, on your guitar case, whatever you want. So if you want some, let us know right now. They're yours, just as our way of saying thank you for listening to us as we're getting off the ground and getting going. We really appreciate it. And now, back to the show. You keep talking about the Grammys being this way of the industry to sort of jerk itself off, and we talked about kind of radio and how that's changed. But so it's interesting that you get a lot of albums have singles. Everybody knows that. I don't need to explain that. But
yeah,
this is the best track from the album. And it's always the ones you hear on the radio. You get the singles kind of destined for radio play to sort of promote the album. And I know sort of the point of that is obviously you hear the single, you like the single, you buy the album. Mm-hmm. So you always want to put your best foot forward, which is why you usually the best or catchiest or whatever song is the single.
Which I think is dumb, because especially in today's like age, which I think ties into what your question was. But go ahead and finish your question.
Well, the only reason I think it's dumb is because I hate when an album only the singles are good.
Yeah,
I kind of get that you're always going to have that song where you really wanted to write it, no matter how well you thought it would sell or people would like it. But come on, that's what B-sides albums are for.
Yeah,
because I don't have to buy those. But my point still being, so in today's age where, and I don't have statistics or anything to back this up, I haven't really done research on it, it's just the thought in my head is, do people buy whole albums the way they used to? Because people always say nobody buys CDs anymore.
Yeah.
Nobody buys, people buy, vinyl's kind of making a comeback, but it's sort of as an art thing almost.
Yeah.
It's people buy all their music on, Amazon, iTunes, I guess probably the Google Play Store, I'm sure does a decent business. So you're buying, you get a lot of people buying music digitally, or listening to music on Spotify. Mm-hmm. When you do any of these services, you go through and it's real easy to just pick the tracks you want. Or if it's on the one, on Spotify, you just literally pick the tracks you want. On ones like iTunes, sure, you'll go to the album, but buying the individual track is cheaper than buying the album. In fact, it's incredibly cheap. So do people buy, obviously some people do, but do people enough buy whole albums that this system of use the single to get people buy the album even works anymore?
Speaking from my personal experience, if I like a single and then I download the album or buy it or whatever, any sort of thing, or if I hear the album before I buy it and I don't like the rest of them, I won't buy the album, and I'll just say, fuck it, I don't need that in my collection. I can listen to the single whenever on YouTube.
Now, you mentioned that to me at one point, and I do want to bring up one minor criticism of you saying that. It's just minor. I don't mean this is a complete, against you or anything. Mm-hmm. But you have also mentioned that you listen to a lot of music on Bandcamp. And on Bandcamp, that's not obviously a hard and fast rule, but I have noticed there are a lot of albums you can only buy by the album.
Yeah, there are, and that's...
So you're already a weird music buyer in that sense.
Yeah, I am, and it is kind of a bizarre thing, but I like to, when I listen to music, and I've recently just started doing a little bit more of playing my whole library on random, because I got a new MP3 player, which again is a weird thing to do even in today's day and age, because everybody listens to music on their smartphones. I actually have an MP3 player.
Get MP3. I was going to say, no, I'm pretty sure people on their smartphones, everybody I know listens to their library on the
random. Yeah, but it's like a smartphone thing. But I have
on an MP3 player.
I have a dedicated music device. That's the weird thing, is having a dedicated music device. But I listen to if I don't know what I want to listen to, I listen to random. But I listen to albums. I love listening to albums. If an album is good, I get it no matter, even if there's not a strong single on it, I listen to the album if it's good. But I think in general, most people, and this is just, knowing, at my workplace, knowing what people's music habits are generally, they're like, with the exception of one or two people, they're all like, oh yeah, I like this track, I like this track. I've never heard anyone talk about, oh, I love this album. I've never heard that outside of maybe us or a few other people that we know talking about.
I guess, or maybe specified albums.
Yeah, or specified albums.
It's pretty easy to find somebody who says, even today, I love The Wall.
Yeah.
But you don't see people going, whatever, just, I don't know.
It's like, oh, I love that song by Led Zeppelin. I love I love Black Dog by Led Zeppelin. But they never say, I love Led Zeppelin's album, what is that, 3 or 2?
I don't know.
I don't know. But it's like...
I was thinking more modern. I was thinking, you hear people say they love Thrift Shop.
Yeah.
But how many people... I don't know the name of the album.
The Heist.
Shop's on. Is it The Heist? Okay.
It's The Heist. And I actually own the album because it's good.
Okay. I'm not saying it's not. It's just, people are going, oh, I love Thrift Shop. But it's usually, I guess, more iconic albums if you think of the album. And even then, or perhaps even more so then, because a lot of those do seem to be things like The Wall, where it's more concept-y, people are less likely to probably even know the tracks. They're going to know the album.
Yeah, I can't actually name any of the tracks on The Wall, except maybe except for
The Wall is a track on The Wall.
Yeah.
This is actually easier than you're making it.
No, I'm just saying except The Wall. Yeah.
Okay.
But no, no one says everyone loves Led Zeppelin, right? I don't know many people that dislike Led Zeppelin. We'll just say that.
I do, and it's upsetting because it says horrible things about the quality of the people I associate with.
Oh, well, then rip on them. But rest in pepperonis, mate. Your musical choices and tastes are bad. Because no matter what you say, as popular as Led Zeppelin are just good. Even if you don't want to like them for hipster reasons, they're good. But no one knows. Everyone's like, oh yeah, I love the Immigrant Song, or I love, and most people don't even know what that's called. Most people, it's the Viking one. The Viking one, or more popularly, Stairway to Heaven. Like, but no one knows what album that's from.
Wait, nobody cares. That one's just, it's Stairway to Heaven. You know,
That's an album in and of itself. If you like listen to the extended
but
live
yeah,
tracks.
I see what you mean. But so that's what makes me wonder is today, because we're talking old music now. If you talk modern music,
well, I think
does your average person then really care or know about an album, or is it all tracks?
You know what the funny thing was? I actually heard of all things, I was listening to a review on NPR, and they were reviewing something that wasn't jazz, which is bizarre because they only review jazz albums that came out 50 years ago. They did an album review on Adele's 25, and the whole point.
I've never heard it.
I haven't either,
which is weird because I actually don't hate. I didn't like her second album very much, but I actually really liked Adele's first album because I'm kind of into that soul kind of thing.
I thought it was decent. I didn't listen to her second album
and her
either.
Second one, honestly, it was Rolling in the Deep turned me off of it. It was like, okay, I've heard this 3,000 times. Oh, that and Set Fire to the Rain or whatever song that is.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I was like, I'm done. And then her new one came out and people were like, oh, it's so great. I'm like, I think it must be that I don't listen to the radio or watch TV, but I was just like, how have I not heard this?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I should because apparently it's pretty decent. It's better than her last one. And I was like you. I didn't like Catch Fire in the Rain and Rolling in the Deep or whatever the songs were. Yeah. I didn't like them, but I do like her soul style. It's interesting.
She has a good voice.
She's got a good voice.
She's an undeniably good voice.
But here's the thing: his whole review was about this album is an album with no standout tracks or anything that I could put his finger on as a single. And he was like, it seems like she's trying to say she's distinguishing herself as an artist in an age of digital downloads, where she's saying, look, I'm making every track on this album good. Please buy it. And and he was like, that was his evidence of saying that's reflecting in the record sales. I think there's more to it than that, but I think that's a little bit of it where he might have something to it because every track on it might be, because I haven't heard anything, like honestly, I haven't really heard any Adele songs on the radio that are singles. Necessarily.
And that could be it. It could just be, I mean...
It could just be a good album.
That. There are albums I love because of certain tracks on them. Hot Fuss by the Killers is a great example.
Oh my god. But like the first 4 songs.
Yeah, are amazing. And I'm not saying the rest of the album is bad. It's just, it's not as good. It's not as good. But then there are albums, and again, to use an old example is not really fair, I guess, in a sense. But Pink Floyd's The Wall is... I think one of the best examples of an album that any individual song on it is, I mean, and not saying there's anything wrong with them, but it's as an album is how you listen to The Wall. It's The Wall.
Yeah.
So, or Dark Side of the Moon even more so.
Yeah, I think those are more well, I mean, The Wall is a concept album. And
so is Dark Side of the Moon.
You could argue that any Pink Floyd album is a concept album, maybe not the Division Bell.
Yeah, but when I said The Wall, I think I meant Dark Side of the Moon because now I'm thinking about The Wall is a standout track. But Dark Side of the Moon, it's nothing.
No.
I'd never, even I guess the more popular tracks like Dark Side of the Moon, you're not going to listen to except really in
to make it even to tie it into an album this year. One that I've been trying to figure out if I like the whole album or not was Between the Buried and Me's new album Coma Eclectic. It's a bizarre album, first of all, for Between the Buried and Me because it's got a whole bunch of styles they never do, but it's just one of those things where it's like I don't think that there's any single track on it that I would just post as a standout track at all. But if you listen to the whole thing, there's just ebbs and flows and themes. And I'm not sure where one track ends and one begins.
Which sometimes is bad and sometimes is the point because it's an album, not a collection of tracks.
I mean, if I wanted to go back and pick out a single from it to share with someone, that's the hard part. But I mean, that's the thing. I think that a lot of people, most people nowadays, they really get most of their media, they're like, well, because, people don't have MP3 players anymore. People don't have to buy the album. So they're like, I like this song.
Even when people had MP3 players are the start of not having to buy the album.
They are, and that was my point.
You got iPods, and you just bought the track by track off iTunes, and now that it's on your phone, it's not only do you just buy track by track. When you got your first iPod, you plug into your computer, you turned on iTunes, you bought that way. Even, I think, the early Zune's basically the same way. You plug it in your computer and you buy that way, right?
You can, yeah.
Okay, but it's the later ones, and I guess maybe the early Zune's were already at this point, but I know I keep saying Zune's as if I need to include them, but only I'm thinking because there are people like yourself who were in that crowd and loved it.
Yeah.
But iPod's obviously the obvious go-to example, but now it's the point where you get your iPhone or your Galaxy, or even if you're a weird person and you don't use the popular ones, your Windows phone.
Yeah.
You hop on the popular music store and you buy the track right on your device, either through Wi-Fi or, for God's sakes, you might buy it on your cell phone data plan.
Yeah.
And download the track you want right then and there for 99 cents the moment you hear it on the radio. Not only do you never think about the album, you're never even sitting down long enough to do it. You're downloading putting it right to the device you're going to play it from, the track you want right now.
Although, come to think of it, I think we're giving the whole like shift from album to single or album to like individual like track being consumed in sort of a way, in a different way, too much credit. I feel like that was still sort of a niche thing to do even back in the day. It was more common, but it was still more niche because you still had radio play. You still had people listening to the radio because they couldn't afford buying records all the time, you know,
yeah,
stuff
but still,
like that.
if you were going to buy any music, you bought
a record.
Whole albums. You couldn't not buy whole albums. If you bought a record or a CD, you got the whole thing.
They did have
there's best ofs and compilations.
Well, they had what was it? 40? No, not 45s.
No,
45s.
Yeah, they had singles, but even then, usually singles were either made for radio play or DJ boxes or something, you know, or they were something special usually. It was, you know, this is this particular single. You're not going to listen to a whole lot of 45 singles in a row because it's a pain in the ass to switch them out.
Yeah.
You're gonna buy a record.
Well, and I think the other thing too is it's just the capacity of things now. I mean, like you do have a lot of capacity with cloud storage, but phones in general, like if you're getting a specific music device, like you didn't really have to worry about storage. Like when you had records, you put it in a box.
Yeah, well, but think of it, even now, no, because I think we've transcended that. We went from having no space for storage to now the things have storage again.
They do, and well, because I mean, like I can buy
you can get a smartphone that stores as much stuff on it as your computer.
Yeah, I mean, like I just bought my MP3 player. I bought a micro SD card, 128 gigabyte micro SD, which is smaller than my thumbnail.
Yeah, so it's not.
It's insane.
I think even the space considerations are going. I think it's the convenience consideration. It's the same reason when people talk about ditching TV for Netflix or something, which I'm not going to get into right now, but you know, the whole, I can just watch whatever show I want whenever I want. It's the same thing in that sense, or even why people like Spotify. You go on and you don't have to listen to the whole album. You don't even have to buy the whole album. This is the one I want. Click. And if you're on something like Spotify, you're just listening to it. Or YouTube. Enough people listen to music on YouTube just through watching music videos, basically usually leaving them in the background. You know, YouTube started very recently now a music service. YouTube Red is basically a music service. I
mean, some people could debate that some of the bigger content creators out there as well, but it's mostly for music.
Yeah,
yes.
Most people. It's been very heavily touted as it's basically YouTube's music service.
Like it's music and PewDiePie.
Yeah,
is what it is.
but that's the thing. It's like because even then on YouTube, you're not listening to often whole albums. And generally, most of the whole album videos where it's a whole album playing are, you know, they're not the artist having uploaded. They're not official. Yeah. The official ones, it's usually one track. So you get things like Spotify and YouTube where you're doing it for free or for cheap or for a subscription. And ones like iTunes, you're not listening to whole albums because there's no need to. You go, oh, that's that song I like, click, and then before you even acknowledge the rest of the album, you're off looking for that other song you like by some other person on some other album.
True. Although actually this morning I was listening to some albums on YouTube that I didn't have. Actually just looking at a record label that I generally like, and I was like, what have they come out with recently? Pure Noise Records. They actually have all of their albums and tracks available on their YouTube.
But now are the albums, is it one video for the whole album?
No,
or is it like playlists?
It's playlists.
Yes, but even then you're talking a separate page for each one, so people are going to find the individual videos.
Yeah, but they are. But if you get there and you stay there and you don't change it after the song's done, it goes automatically to the next one.
But is that how your average person's necessarily going to?
Not necessarily, but I mean, like it's an automatic thing, though.
But I'm still talking the average. If I'm going out to find that song I like.
Well, I mean, what's the advantage then of artists making albums anymore?
Oh,
should they at all? Should they just do like a couple singles here and there, and then?
Well, I think part of it is when they say album sales are dropping. One thing that is always sort of the implication in that's it's not like it's a good implication or anything, it's just there. Album sales are dropping does mean there are still album sales.
Yeah.
They're not gone. So that's one thing. I think there are still people who buy things like CDs, either for use in their cars, because as much as, you know, the really new cars, you just plug your MP3 player right into it and you're good to go. There are still plenty of people who listen to CDs, tapes, and the radio in their cars.
Yeah,
that's why the radio constantly likes to tell you, hey, advertise on the radio. It's worth money. That's because people still listen to the radio in their cars.
Hey, it's radio. This is the greatest commercials.
Exactly. So there are still situations in which that happens, and I think there's also a sort of there's a romance about it, being able to buy a CD. You can get people a CD as a gift still. I mean, there's still lots of situations in which they come up.
Buying someone a CD or a record is a lot more I guess, not necessarily intimate, but it's a lot more thoughtful than buying them here's an iTunes gift card.
Exactly. An iTunes gift card is usually what you get is like, oh, I got this for my nephew whose music tastes I don't understand, or my grandkid. Or a lot of times, it'll be like, oh, you did some nice thing helping out some organization, and they give all the volunteers like a $5 iTunes gift card. I've gotten one that way. That's the kind of thing where it's like...
But then you burned it because fuck iTunes, right?
I gave it to a friend of mine who uses iTunes.
Oh, okay. I'm slightly disappointed, but at least you didn't use it.
But it's still that for the average everyday going out to find a song situation, because it's no longer necessary to buy a whole album, it just seems... I think that affects the way you hear music anymore, because I think there's a lot more, I don't want to say room to experiment, but I think that's part of when they talk about, and you posted an article that talked about this, and we're running low on time, so I'll keep this short, but the article mentioned that you see a lot of the same music over and over and over because people like it and they ask for it. They like peppy, easy to catch, easy to pick up the words, that kind
just
of thing.
simple.
Yeah, and so when you get that combined with the easiness to just grab a single, it reduces the amount of out there stuff you're going to hear. When you had to buy a whole CD or a whole record to get that one song you really like, maybe that one song you really like is catchy, popular, and easy to get along with. Maybe there's other tracks on that album that are weird or unusual. They might not be the kind of thing you would normally listen to, but you're going to hear them a few times listening to that album you bought. That's going to expand your horizons. You're going to see more weird things. So I wonder if the fact that you see a little less experimental or weird music, except in the sort of undergroundy experimental communities, or even the overgroundy ones.
Because I remember a time when the Mars Volta was actually fairly big.
Yeah,
but they're not anymore.
But I mean, outside of people like, Brian Eno and the kind of the bigger, more experimental, the reason I think you see a little less experimentation among some artists is because of that. I don't even want to say less. Maybe you don't, it's not that you see less, it's that you see less. Not there is less.
You just see less.
Because now that people aren't buying the whole album, they're buying the track they like. Even if the artist did experimentation with some of the like B-sidey tracks on the album, nobody bought the whole album into the same scale that used to happen.
Here's a thought though. I mean, you kind of never really answered my question as like, why you thought that, why is it advantageous of buying the album? Why not, in this case, and I'm just going to throw this out here, and if there are any musicians out there who have released albums, just feel free to chime in on this. Why not release it? You make a whole album's worth of records and you release a single, and then a month later you release a single, and then a month later you release a single, and then a month later you release a single. Instead of releasing one album. I mean, would that be a little bit more advantageous? Because here's this band I really like, and I really like the single, but that's the only song that they have available at the time.
When you put it in that context, I have an answer for that. This does not apply for all bands, especially in a day and age where we have a lot of bands. You do have these large crowds of people writing songs together for some bands. So there's sort of an exception because you have, basically a team of engineers designed to make pop hits. But even in those situations, and much more so for bands where there's less personnel per track. Personnel per track. When a track is less engineered, when it's more just a band doing it. Remember, albums go through focus groups. They're heard by a zillion people before they're released. They're at least heard by producers and
of course,
sound engineers and stuff like that. So if you record let's say you record 12 tracks. Let's say an album is 7 to 12 tracks. Let's say you record somewhere in there, which is about an album. For your average group of those, how many are going to be single worthy? Like, to record nothing but singles, that's like, some people just aren't going to make all singles. No matter how they try, no matter how little experimentation they do, they're not going to have things that are all going to be singles.
I don't know if I agree with that, because, if you have like a legitimate following with people, and then, because it's getting, you have this big event, you have like an album release party, you have all this stuff like that. If you're just, if you have these singles that you release over and over again, of an entire album, I feel like you generate more buzz that way for your particular band, because you're releasing something new all the time.
You might, but I still think,
I mean,
and
you still have stuff you say, look, we've recorded this whole album, we're releasing it incrementally, you can hear all of these songs at our shows.
But again, every one of those songs has to be as successful as a single.
I don't think so.
I think it has to have a level of quality that will be liked on a more mainstream level, because a small group of fans will only get you so far. Bands don't make all their money off their group of hardcore fans. They make it off the massive sales outside of their fan base. That's why one-hit wonders exist.
Yeah, I don't know.
You can make $1 zillion making, Fastball doing The Way, and then name another Fastball song. Go for it.
God, I know.
That song played all the time in the 90s, though. Everybody knows that song.
Yeah.
Nobody can name another Fastball song. Obviously not nobody. There are probably Fastball fans. There's a best of Fastball compilation out there. But they had the one single that had success. And I'm not saying even that's where, like, necessarily being a band that does well enough to be a good band is. I'm saying that's where the money is.
Yeah.
The real money. So I think you could, do an album and release one track at a time, but it would end up, A, being viewed as an art project, which is going to hurt you, and B, unless you're the kind where you have a large group of personnel focused on making sure each track is in fact perfect, you're just not going to have written enough single-worthy tracks, probably, that every one of them will be successful in the standalone format released that way. You're going to have hits and you're going to have misses. But remember, if you're releasing your misses as singles, it's expensive to release a single. It's a money loss.
I mean, if you release them all digitally as well.
If you're just doing it digitally,
that's the format I'm thinking of.
But but then you're losing the radio play and the stuff. Because
yeah, but a lot of these bands, how many of them are getting radio play anyway? That we're really feasibly
tons if you're on the right
about.
if you're on the right stations. If you're listening to the right stations.
Yeah, I mean, but if you're still getting, new singles every once in a while, you're still going to have maybe one or two radio stations across the country play it. I mean, you're still going to get some sort of exposure from somewhere across the world because
I'm just thinking.
I don't think it would
work. I don't think it would work as well as you think it would on a large scale. It might work for a band.
Yeah,
you could be the band that does the singles, but I just don't think on a large scale it would work in a way that would be profitable for numerous bands.
You might be right on that. I mean, and again, that was sort of a theoretical thing that I was kind of in my head. I'm thinking, well, why don't we just go to the opposite extreme? We're releasing albums, but everyone's consuming singles. Why don't we see about giving the people what they want, do singles, giving people singles, releasing them over time, generating hype, and then, look, we'll play all these songs at our shows, the new ones, all the time, and we have new songs for 12 months. Let's make a 12-track album. Every month we play a show. There's a few songs that people haven't heard, because they haven't been released. And at the end of the year, they go in studio, maybe write another album, maybe next year write another album, and then do the same thing over. And so you still have this new generation of hype all the time. And it might only be from like a few people here and there, but you're gonna get one at some point that a lot of people like. And then they're going to say, well, what else have these guys done? And they're going to go back into their backlog and see they've released all these other songs as singles. And then they're going to say, oh, I like this one, I like this one. And they may not pick everyone. But, I mean, if you think about it too, it's slightly more profitable if you're just releasing them directly digitally for 99 cents, depending on who you're releasing it with. You may have more profit if you're releasing them off of, individually off of Bandcamp for 99 cents a song, or $1 or something like that.
Hang on, but then nobody's going to ever find your back catalog because they're all shopping on iTunes.
Well, yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, but no, so if you release them on iTunes or if you release them on Bandcamp or wherever you release them digitally, depending on how much it is, because an album, it's not, if you have 12 tracks, sometimes it can be more than $12, sometimes it's less. You could be more profitable doing it that way, depending on how many songs you release.
Okay, that's fair.
And I don't know, I mean, again, it's just a thing, if there are any musicians out there that want to just, write in, or, we don't have really have a phone number.
If you want to be on the show to talk about this very subject,
yeah, go ahead.
What it's like being a musician.
Feel free.
Let us know.
Because I don't know.
Maybe we'll get a musician on at some point to talk about this. This has been All Downhill.
You've been listening to All Downhill. For show notes, more episodes, news, and more information, visit alternative-internet.com/alldownhill. If you like the show, please rate us on iTunes. You can also find us on Facebook, facebook.com/alldownhillshow, and on Twitter @alldownhillshow. For advertising information or other inquiries, contact Patrick Simmons via email, patrick@alternative-internet.com. The music used in this episode was Under the Sea by the IMG from their album Kaleidoscope. Thank you for listening.
You don't believe what people say.